What is good? What is good, YouTube fam? How is everyone? Hope everyone is doing well in this crazy world we're in, right? So today we're going to be checking out something a little different. I'm a firm believer in remembering the past, remembering history, and true history, not the fake history that's stuffed down our throats. I'm a big time history buff, and this is actually a topic I've talked about quite a bit, different reactions and stuff. This is the truth about the Irish, first slaves brought to Americas. So this is definitely part of forgotten history that people don't talk about, nor do they acknowledge, it seems like. So let's jump on in it, shall we? I'm not sure how much I'm should
There
be
has
pausing
been an
this or...
ongoing debate as to whether the Irish were the first slaves in the Americas, predating the first black African slaves by almost a decade. Slavery is perhaps one of the oldest profit-making endeavors in human history, and the Irish were a special target for 1,000 years.
Throughout history, the Irish were persecuted by one faction or another, to include enslavement and indentured servitude. When did the Irish first become slaves? How long did the selling of the Irish continue? Who was responsible?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former soldier, Marine Corps scout sniper, history professor, historian, and book author. And we will answer these questions and other issues on this segment of Forgotten History.
Thank you for your service, sir. Appreciate it. Really do.
Some groups deny the Irish slavery under English and later British rule, claiming that this was nothing more than voluntary indentured servitude, which did exist. However, there are counter-arguments that will be challenged here. There is a legitimate dispute as to the numbers enslaved, especially during the 17th century before the Act of Union in 1707. The official British legal terminology used was indentured servants. Whether the servants in question had willingly signed the indenture contract to emigrate to the Americas or were first to go. Many were forced. Therefore, those transported unwillingly and effectively sold were not considered to be indentured. This included political prisoners, vagrants, convicts, political activists, thieves, prostitutes, or people who had been defined as undesirable by the English government. The Irish introduction to slavery was during the first Viking raids in the year 795, lasting through the mid-9th century. This period saw the Irish killed and enslaved. Just like many other societies, the Vikings attacked. Most of these early raids were along the northern and eastern coast using hit-and-run tactics. The Vikings would then flee with treasure and slaves and return to either their holdings in Scotland or back to Norway. Usually, many slaves who were of value were ransomed back to their families, but others remained in captivity. Then,
a lot of stuff here I didn't know. Interesting. So, the Irish have been enslaved a long time. I wonder what people have been enslaved the longest on, through history. It sounds the Irish have been there a long time. I wonder where, what the timeline is for, I guess I shouldn't say timeline. I can't think today. It's all good. But, that's definitely very interesting. People always forget that other people were enslaved on this planet. And, we gotta remember that. We can't just focus on one, descent that's been enslaved, because there's been a lot. Native Americans, the Irish, obviously, Sicilians, blacks, every creed, every creed, every color, every nationality has been enslaved at some point in our timeline. We got to remember that.
And returned to either their holdings in Scotland or back to Norway. Usually, many slaves who were of value were ransomed back to their families, but others remained in captivity. Then, from the year 837 onward, larger targets such as the greater monastic towns of Armagh, Glendalough, Kildare, Slane, Clonard, and Clonmacnoise, and Lismore were hit by larger forces. These large-scale raids generally spared the smaller local churches and villages far inland, but slaves were still taken, mostly to Scotland and Iceland. In 875, Irish slaves in Iceland launched Europe's largest slave rebellion since the end of the Roman Empire, when Hrólfr Hjalmarsson's slaves killed him and fled to Vestmannaeyjar. In 841, the port that became known as Dublin was taken and occupied by both Olaf and Ivar the Boneless, and by 853, this part of Ireland was a Norse trading center, and slaves were a large part of it. The slave trade did not stop with Ivar's death in 873. Finally, in 902, driven out of Dublin by the combined forces of Brega and Leinster, but the Vikings came back in 914 and reclaimed all the territory, taking more slaves. But Irish resistance was not over. In 980, the Irish, under Mael Sechnal Mac Domhnall, king of Meath, fought and managed to defeat the Vikings and freed all of their slaves. Some Vikings who remained assimilated and adapted to Christianity and became part of Irish society. The final nail in the coffin regarding Vikings holding land and taking slaves was in 1014 at the Battle of Clontarf, when Brian Boru, High King of Ireland, attacked Dublin, aided by his allies, the Limerick Vikings. They fought other Irish allied to the local Vikings in Dublin, and Boru's force won, and all the slaves were again freed, thus ending the legacy of constant Norse raids, whether from Danes or Norwegians. The period forced enslavement and severity ended a century after the Norman invasion of England in October 1066. Subsequent Norman rulers of England eyed Ireland, and slavery in its true form was abolished in 1102. In 1155, Pope Adrian IV supposedly gave Henry II of England a papal bull, granting the king the authority to invade Ireland. However, many historians believe that this authorization was a forgery. Regardless, Henry II of England faced excommunication for the murder of Thomas à Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, so it is possible. However, Adrian's successor, Pope Alexander III, granted the lands of Ireland to Henry II, although it was not his land to give. The Norman conquest of England and Ireland were cataclysmic events that would shape Ireland's as well as world history and create tensions with England for the next 800 years. The Normans were initially invited to Ireland by Dermot MacMurrough, the deposed king of Leinster. He is sometimes referred to as Dermot of the Foreigners, and his grandmother was the...
So there's a lot in here that I had no clue about. Drop comment. Let me know if you learned anything, or what you think of this so far. This it's interesting. I didn't realize how far back this timeline went. So this is very interesting. Like I said, I big history buff. I really like diving into it. It's gotta remember our past and our history, so we can look forward to the future and look to see if we're gonna hit those same road bumps. We gotta live in the present. Always gotta live in the present. Right now I'm seeing a lot of mistakes that are being made that we've done before. And it's scary, because not a good road seems to be we're heading down. Let's get back to it. I'm feeling this could be a long one.
He is sometimes referred to as Dermot of the Foreigners, and his grandmother was the granddaughter of Brian Boru. In October 1171, King Henry II landed in Ireland and allowed Dermot to recruit soldiers and mercenaries, as Ireland was made up of several kingdoms at war with each other. The city of Dublin and the surrounding area were under Norman occupation and would be called the Pale, or the safe zone. Going beyond that was considered
Ireland,
foolish,
actually,
hence the term we use today,
always
going
been through a
beyond
lot
the
of
Pale.
turmoil. It
But the
seems
Normans
like.
ended the practice of slavery in Ireland, but not serfdom, for at least a few hundred years. Despite the Norman abolishment of slavery, serfdom was still alive and well. Serfs were, unlike slaves, bound to the land, and the land meant everything. So selling people into slavery would have left no one to farm and conduct agriculture. Following the Battle of Kinsale, in 1601, when the Irish and Spanish alliance was defeated, the Irish aristocracy fled to Europe, but the commoners remained, and they left a power vacuum filled by English nobles. Reports vary, and the numbers are in dispute, but the high number is that English forces had 30,000 captured Irish and Spanish soldiers. Other sources say half that number, around 15,000, were engaged, with 7,000 to 8,000 being captured. The Spanish allies were allowed to leave, but not the Irish. In 1603 or 1604, King James I of England, crowned on March 23, 1603, reportedly issued the order of banishment. This allowed those Irish captured to be sold, a permanent banishment. After nearly a decade, the king gave permission for the English Governor-General to collect and sell the captured Irish soldiers as slaves and send them to the New World in the Americas. In 1612, the first recorded Irish slaves were sold, possibly to the Portuguese, and taken to the Amazon River Basin, in their colony in modern-day Brazil. This brought them to the New World. There has been some dispute as to whether these people were indentured servants or slaves, but it is clear that they were forced out of Ireland to the New World, so it seems illogical and ridiculous to assume that they went voluntarily, hence the status of slaves. It has been chronicled that in 1625, James I's son, Charles I, issued the decree, and it may be possible before his death in March 1625, but given the timeline on James's death, it would appear that his son, Charles, probably did issue the royal decree authorizing the Irish slaves. This included prisoners captured, those deemed to be common criminals, and rabble-rousers who were sold. They were to become the property of the English plantation owners in the North American colonies. As a result, tens of thousands of Irish men and women were sent to the Eastern American colonies, as well as Guyana, Antigua, and Montserrat. As well, between 1629 and 1632, as other Caribbean locations over the next few decades were infiltrated, but the exact number may never be known. By 1637, approximately 69% of the population of Montserrat were Irish. Many were indentured servants, yet some were slaves. The rationale was simple. Black slaves had to be purchased at a cost of around 20 to 50 pounds sterling, a huge sum of money in those days. However, Irish slaves were sold for 900 pounds of cotton per person, but also traded for tobacco and indigo in a straight barter system. It would appear that the Irish then became the largest source of slaves for English slave traders and plantation owners at that time, far surpassing the African slave trade until the early to mid-1700s. Between 1641, during the Irish Rebellion, to 1652, it has been stated that over 550,000 Irish were killed by English forces, and 300,000 more were sold as slaves, mostly military-aged men. Their children, especially women and girls, were sold and considered quite valuable in the domestic service roles. The greatest perpetrator of this was Oliver Cromwell, who defeated Charles I in 1649 during the English Civil War and had him executed. Cromwell, as Lord Protector, waged a ruthless war against the Irish, starting in 1649. By 1650, it is claimed that nearly 29,000 Irish were sold to planters in St. Kitts. During the decade of the 1650s, it is also claimed, as well as disputed, that around 100,000 Irish children, generally from 10 to 14 years of age, were taken from their parents and were also sold, and sold themselves also as slaves or indentured servants in the West Indies, Virginia, the Carolinas, and New England. It is also
That is just mind-blowing, the numbers. I didn't realize also the reach. Or how far and widespread they were taken. Man, that's wild. I don't understand the whole owning of another person, or it just logically it doesn't make sense to me. I guess in a business form back in those times, I guess it could, but it's despicable. It's gross. Either way you look at it, even if you think about it as logically as a business standpoint for, whatever, your agriculture or whatnot, it's still fucking despicable and still a fucking piece of shit move. Doesn't matter which way you go with it, it's still fucking disgusting. I don't understand why humans have to be like this. Why humans are so such heartless, careless, fucking ruthless people. I mean, just it's disgusting to me. It really is. I don't understand it.
In the West Indies, Virginia, the Carolinas, and New England. It is also claimed that between 1651 and 1660, the Irish slaves far outnumbered the colonists in all areas. In 1652, Cromwell ordered that 12,000 Irish were to be sold to Barbados, and those numbers are not in dispute, only their status. On 1 May 1654, his "To Hell or to Connaught" proclamation was issued during the Act of Settlement of 1662. This was when the English began confiscating all Irish-held lands, and the native Irish were relocated west of the Shannon River. Those who resisted were sent to the West Indies as slaves or executed. His own words proclaimed, quote, "Those who fail to transplant themselves into Connaught or County Clare within 6 months shall be attainted of high treason, or to be sent to America or other parts beyond the seas. Those banished who return ought to suffer the pains of death as felons by virtue of this act without benefit of clergy." End quote. The English could kill the Irish without penalty, but selling them offered great profit. It is claimed that over 80,000 more Irish were sold, with 52,000 going to the colonies of Barbados and Virginia, but again we cannot verify the exact numbers. Many argue that these were indentured servants, not slaves, yet there are no records of contracts between those forcibly removed and their benefactors. One may assume that, given the barter system of using tobacco and cotton as a trade item for workers, that these deported Irish were, in fact, slaves. In 1656, the Council of State ordered the roundup of 1,000 Irish girls and 1,000 Irish boys in their early teens, even some children to be rounded up and sold to Jamaican planters. These numbers are in dispute, but do seem reasonable, as these would be children whose parents were already deported. Part of this order was an edict passed on October 2, 1665, which stated, quote, "Upon report of Committee for America concerning proposals for transporting persons from Long Island to Jamaica, to confer with the Committee for Jamaica." End quote. The persons were Irish, and no indentured servant would be released to go to Jamaica. These had to be forcibly exported Irish, who were already present in New York. In fact, some of the English receiving these Irish slaves seemed rather concerned, hence this following report, quote, "Commission appointing Cornelius Holland, Colonel Owen Roe, Sir Thomas Roth, and 14 others accompany, by the name of the Governor and Company of the City of London, for the plantation of the Somers Islands, to take into consideration the present condition of those plantations, many well-affected persons there having been much oppressed and unjustly dealt with in relation to matters of conscience." End quote. Whitehall, 1653, June 28th. This situation, with the forcibly removed Irish not being a people to take subjugation lightly, appeared to have created the fear of an uprising, and this seems to be explained in the Whitehall document from November 18, 1656. Quote, "The Council of State to Captain Wilkinson. Importance of the Somers Islands to the interest of the Commonwealth. Supposition that the Spaniards will endeavor to get a footing there. Doubtful that a principle of disaffection may yet be retained by some of the inhabitants. He is encouraged to attend to his duties as commander of the fort, to keep a vigilant eye upon the malignant and discontented party, that they may have the less opportunity to prejudice the island's safety, and to use his best endeavors to secure the interest of the Commonwealth." End quote. This referred to the Irish population that must have been slaves, and they feared an uprising. No reason to worry about indentured servants. So, whether one accepts the reality of Irish slavery or not, the fact remains that there were Irish people forced into slavery. However, the exact numbers may never be known.
We hope you enjoyed this segment of Forgotten History. Please click like and subscribe for free. And please stay tuned and be engaged and informed. Send us comments if you have questions or even show ideas, and we will respond to all requests and comments as soon as we can. Thank you.
Wow. That is mind-boggling. The numbers, the rough, numbers, and just forcing people away from their homes like that is just, it's wild. And people want to ignore this side of history. But if we ignore it and wash it down, then we're gonna repeat it. That's why we can't do that. We need to remember our history. And we gotta keep it in our memories. That way we don't repeat the shit at all. If nobody wants to repeat anything like this. I mean, this is just horrific. Sickening that this happened to anybody through any generation and any race. But just remember, blacks weren't the only ones that were enslaved. And there's plenty of videos on it on YouTube talking about the Africans rounding up their own people to send over here because whites couldn't go into the interior of Africa because they would die so fast because they weren't immune to any of the diseases that were in the jungles and stuff. So when white people went to the coast, they stayed on the coast and they just loaded their ship and bounced out. And actually, what's being discovered and stuff, just as many sailors that were piloting the ships died as the slaves that were on the ships. It was crazy to think about. Just the whole the whole thing's wild. It really is. It's disgusting. Sure, plenty of people wish that this had never gone on, but unfortunately, that's our history. What it is. Can't change it, but we can do better. We can definitely do better. And we got to come together as a people. Quit fighting each other. No point to it. Come together as a society, move forward. I think we can get there, but it definitely isn't going to be overnight. But it's been long enough. If you guys enjoyed this, though, please let me know. We'll do some more stuff like this. Drop your comments. You got anything to add, or you want to know something more, if I can provide it, or whatever, or give you something, they'll be able to give you your answer. I will. Also, links will be down in the description box. And like, share, comment, subscribe. Comments are a huge thing. The more comments, the more your video gets pushed. Comments are a huge thing, and every one of us content creators, we really do appreciate everyone that does, anything. Comment, subscribe, like, share it around, whatever it is. We just appreciate it. With that being said, we're going to get up out of here. Much love, everyone. Respect. And we'll see you on the next one. Peace.
I don't know where we're going, but I know that you're losing me. I'm sick from all the motion. Going in circles got me so dizzy.